I'd like to call to order meeting of the Downtown Development Authority for December 5th. Susan, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Newcomb Clark. Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel. Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Hufja. Joe Lowenstein. Here. John Moat.
Here.
Nader Nassif.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is audience participation, and the first person I've signed up is Scott Munzel. You have 4 minutes.
Okay, I'll be quicker than that. Scott Munzel, representing Opus Development Corporation, which you may remember came before you requesting parking pursuant to the city's contribution in lieu of program. I just wanted to give you a brief update. A site plan application has been submitted. We expect to be on the Planning Commission agenda on January 15th. And it would be probably best if by that point in time we knew where the parking spaces were going to be, because I'm sure Planning Commission will ask that question as part of their commenting. So I just wanted to let you know about that timing. The second thing is the building actually got a little bit smaller, and so now the number of spaces that are being required under the ordinance is only 40. So instead of 42, we're down to 40. And then just lastly, I would again like to request on behalf of Opus that you consider putting all 40 in the 40th Street parking structure, or the 4th Street parking structure. Our opinion is that that would best meet the intent of the contribution in lieu of policy. It could stabilize some revenues to the DDA created from that particular structure. And the last item is there could be some ways that we may be able to optimize the outcomes for both the DDA and Opus, and so that at the time that you're actually making the decision, it might be worth having us sit down and chat about it a little bit informally as well. All right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next person on our list is Maura Thompson.
Good afternoon.
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, I won't take 4 minutes. I'm Maura Thompson. I run Main Street Area Association, and I'm here today really just to publicly thank the Downtown Development Authority for our holiday lights display. That holiday lights display, I believe, contributes significantly to stimulating the downtown economy, especially during the holiday season. I think that the impact that those lights have on the visitor experience really can't be measured, but I think it really it creates that environment that makes people feel connected to this downtown. It makes people want to talk to other people about how great they think this downtown is. So as somebody who promotes downtown or works to promote downtown, thank you for making my job easier, and I just think it's important for you all to know how much we appreciate the efforts of this Downtown Development Authority. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. The next person on our list to speak is Jim Ballmer.
I think everybody knows me.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, you all, I think, have already received our request. We came before the committee a few weeks ago and talked about it, asking for your help in reducing our debt on 2 of our properties, 326 Beeks and 324 Summit, which will allow us to free up funds to do other kinds of downtown activities, including Charles and others doing outreach, Panhandlers Task Force, and our hope to, you guys are in part responsible for us starting the Chapin Street project, transitional housing, to begin with many years ago, and to allow us to expand that, to create more opportunities for people in recovery to live in downtown. So, I didn't know if you folks had any questions based on, like I said, I think you've all seen the proposal we submitted, but answered lots of questions from the committee. So,
Okay. Thank you very much.
all right. Thank you.
The next person on our agenda is Alan Haber.
Oh, thank you. I thought I was going
Hi.
to have to wait to the end. I'm Alan Haber. As often, too often, come with a complaint. regarding the process for assessing downtown properties that your leadership outreach in Connecting William Street has been doing. This committee, in my view, has basically refused to look at the option that most people in Ann Arbor, asking around, really would like in the library lot, that there be a downtown park, commons, green place, community place, gathering place, not sold, not commercial, for everyone, on the flat area that isn't the library lane or the road going into the underground. From the beginning to the end of this process, or so far, as near as I've been able to tell, there's not really been a look at this community desire or an altering of the original plan that there be a small corner by the library that could be a concrete park of some sort, plaza, but not to look at the benefits, the extensive literature on the benefits of public amenity in the centers of downtown, economic and social benefit for the whole downtown area. So the literature hasn't been looked at, or I haven't heard it analyzed or reviewed or criticized. There's been no move in the various scenarios put forward, big, bigger, and biggest, from which this process started. There should be a scenario to let the people develop the surface area there as a public place, allowing, for instance, right now, let it be the people develop a skating rink for the winter. Let us build a platform, put real or artificial ice on it, however, and let for the winter. It is silly that that surface be now used for surface parking. What you want is to get people trained and used to going into the underground. 243 spaces available underground, 17 spaces cars on the surface. They don't need to be there. They can be in the underground. People could have the surface. Why is there the block actually to hear what so many people, beyond the pesky people like me, just want to have a place, like I've been here longer than most of you people have even been alive in Ann Arbor, where there used to be a courthouse, where there used to be a town center. We should have it back. We should see the greatest benefit the DDA could do would be to make that library lot surface a green roof, that plan, a people's place for everyone. That's my complaint. I hope when you get the report from the leadership outreach team that you would make a new scenario that you put forward to the city council. Not simply pass on, but there's been some rational calculations of how to make money and how to serve various objectives without looking at community. This is a place where community should come before money, someplace in the heart of Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next item is reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter, you're up.
Every year, the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council has an annual dinner party discussion where we review the goals we want to work for in the coming year and sometimes discuss our success in achieving the goals we set for ourselves last year. Last night, we also heard a report from Susan Polley on the progress of the Connecting William Street efforts, which we have participated, of course, over the last few years, and we strongly support. Specifically, last night, members made very clear that they wanted the city to put every effort into making repairs to the street and sidewalks on South 4th between East Huron and Washington. And also, very specifically, they want to see a more consistent approach to maintaining the downtown landscape and replacing trees on the public streets of Ann Arbor. There were other specifics, but members all agreed last night that we want to put a greater emphasis upon residential housing as a part of the Connecting William Street efforts to provide larger numbers of people living and working in the downtown. As one of our members said, Connecting William Street must be gotten right. This is the key to the downtown's future, for as far as many are concerned. And our members made clear that they do not want any more incentives that might encourage undergraduate student housing in the downtown. They argue that there is a growing demand for non-student housing. People of all ages and incomes we know want to live in the downtown. There are reasons why they can't do that. Lack of availability in terms of housing is one of those reasons. And our members want to add residential housing for permanent residents, not just people who are here temporarily. In recent weeks, representatives of the 8 downtown, near downtown, and near downtown residential neighborhood associations have been negotiating directly with the developers of the proposed massive 14-story, over 200-unit student housing building at 401-413 East Huron, just east of Sloan Plaza and immediately adjacent to the residential historic Old Fourth Ward neighborhood. The committee reported recently that Greenfield Partners, the financial backers of this student housing project, had rejected all our requests to improve the massing, setbacks, and design of the building in response to the suggestions that have been made by Ann Arbor's Downtown Design Guidelines Board. The Design Board recognized that context is important, and this project was a part of a specifically identified design guidelines character area, adjacent to a residential and historic neighborhood. Through their architectural and planning representatives, Greenfield Partners indicated that any further changes would threaten the financial profitability of their project. The bottom line is money. They want to make the maximum that they can on that site, and they call it by right, and they're going to build it to make that money that they committed. And that was the position they took. Our members are very pleased, however, to see that the Connecting William Street draft recommendations on density and massing for future building on city-owned lots makes clear that, and I quote here, that surrounding context should be considered in buildings designed to step back from lower-scale neighbors. The Planning Commission would be required, under the Connecting William Street approach, on public property to report to City, the Planning Commission would be required to report to City Council how developers considered changes to their design in response to the Design Guidelines review process. In the future, the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council will join with the other 8 downtown and near downtown neighborhood groups in working toward the same improvement of our design review process for all major new buildings in the downtown, not just those on public property. It's not mandatory, but we can certainly improve the process by having a part of the discussion of those design guidelines suggestions in both the Planning Commission process and also City Council. And we'll be working in that direction, and we look forward to the Connecting William Street in terms of public properties to do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Is there any communication from DDA members? Nader.
Briefly, just to kind of follow up on the lighting that was on Main Street. I live on 4th Avenue now, and that's something that actually had been brought up. The potential, I mean, it's something I'd like to see what possibilities there are to expand the ability for lighting around more of the downtown, not just on Main Street, for the other businesses that are on 4th and let's say on Ashley, and kind of maybe spread out that way. My understanding is there was power and lighting that went to the lamps.
By the plugs on the poles.
Right. So I guess my question is to the board and to everybody is to see what potential or what possibilities we have to expand that to other streets.
Take that under advisement. Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Sandy?
I think that's a great piece of low-hanging fruit that sometimes the DDA does really well, and it makes a big difference. One of the other things that came out at the Rays meeting last night was wayfinding to the border trail and the Cascades within the downtown. So it's something else that maybe we could look at that would be very inexpensive and easy to do, but just to let people know that maybe new to town that there's a great natural feature very nearby.
Okay, any further comment? Then we'll move on to the DDA retreat debriefing. Susan?
So one of the items you have on your agenda just about ahead of us is the board minutes being approved, and one of them are the retreat minutes. We had, for the public, a very engaged DDA retreat a couple weeks ago, November 17th. We spent a fair amount of time talking about the basics What were DDAs created to do? What was this DDA created to do? What do we feel we do well, and what did outside stakeholders say that we do well? And there are other things that we've striven for, but maybe are not to our core purpose, or things that we don't do as well. So there was a lot of discussion about the state enabling language, the DDA development plan, the elements of the plan that we're underway with now, and what we want to do more of. So with that, there was a very brief meeting before this session where a few board members got together and started to think about how to take our dialogue forward. Because there were some elements of the retreat that called out ideas to keep in step with our development plan, but new tactics. Because as the downtown changes, the role of the DDA is going to keep changing, and we have to be able to respond to it. One key element is identity. There's a lot that the DDA is doing, encapsulating information about the downtown on our website and other. We can do more. We can do more about the identity of downtown being found in a single place. There's more about infrastructure. We're known for this. We do it well. The walkability and the attractiveness of downtown is in large part due to the DDA dollars. There are projects that we're starting to collect where we can begin to take attention to. Connecting William Street, South Main Street are just two big project areas. But the small elements, when someone runs into something on the sidewalk, making sure the bench is fixed and the light is back and righted and so forth. There are other elements that we do a good job with as well, which is transportation and parking, and merging the two. And more we can do with transportation specifically, revisiting questions like the circulator downtown, bringing forward the connector study results and seeing how it interfaces with our activities in downtown. There was a lot of dialogue around business encouragement, and one of the elements is the attractiveness of downtown and how does that help or hinder businesses. And so clean and safe is something we hear at the IDA meetings. What can we as a DDA do to encourage more cleanliness and a greater feeling of safety in the downtown? So there's some ideas that we need to develop, in some part in partnership with the private sector downtown. Much of what we know is working is private sector dollars in the downtown and private sector energies in the downtown. We could tap into that, including, for instance, meeting with the Biz on Main Street, which has been very successful in its first 2 years. And then finally, there was a lot of dialogue around housing and our role with it. It's a key ingredient in our success. And what our role is, we found ourselves in common dialogue or consensus. It should be in keeping with the county and its efforts, the city and its efforts, and then how the DDA and its housing efforts sort of fall in alignment. We have a particularly specialized role, though, as regards to things like workforce housing. There are no non-for-profits out there at this point looking to support this. But as Ray was talking about, we're all in the same search, which is people who live and are contributing to their community, making it possible for them to live in the downtown, and particularly those that might be working in the downtown. Because now they're working and living with fewer cars, more walking on the sidewalk, more activity, and investment and involvement in the downtown. So that, in a very short summary, encapsulated a lot of your work. I don't know if some of you want to sort of fill in some of the gaps for the public around ideas that we're going to start to work on this year as a result of that retreat. A lot of good dialogue, and we certainly covered some really good ideas.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
I'd like a motion to approve the minutes for November 7th, which was our monthly meeting, and November 16th, which was our retreat. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And support? Thank you. Any corrections or additions to the minutes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Subcommittee reports, Partnership and Economic Development, Sandy and Joan, you're up.
We've been hard at work, the partnerships with the Leadership and Outreach Committee on the Connecting William Street. We've put together a presentation that we would like feedback from you all today. As we go forward, there'll be another opportunity for feedback and a look at this and some adjustments at the Partnership Committee, which will be next week, next Monday or Wednesday at 9 o'clock, and then a presentation at the working session for City Council on January 14th.
And at our next board meeting too, which is before the working session. So we can take as long with this as anybody wants to, because we have the opportunity at the other board meeting as well to get some input from all of you. So Amber is going to kind of walk us through this. Sandy and I are going to be the Greek chorus.
I forgot my chair.
Yeah, we're going to move.
Everybody ready? Okay, so we'll dive in here. The place to begin is with City Council
Can
authorization.
we lower that down just a little
Yeah.
bit? Thank you.
Yeah, that's better.
Lay down the downtown.
So, beginning with the City Council authorization, resolution passed on April 4th, 2011, authorizing the DDA to do just what you see on your screen. Take responsibility for facilitating the process of redeveloping these parking sites. And within this resolution, the DDA was authorized to carry out 4 phases, and you can see those phases on your screen. We've moved through 1 and 2, so we've pulled together adopted plans, zoning, and everything that's come before. And we've worked with the community to build upon these existing plans and to shape strategies for these sites. So that's where we are on step 3. And we've focused primarily on the plans that are master plans and also on zoning, because those dictate really what can happen on these sites.
And this is an important thing to emphasize is that we weren't starting from scratch, that this connecting William Street is an add-on to what's already been done in terms of planning that encompassed all of the public engagement that happened with all of these other plans. And so we're not starting over, but we're building on what has already been done in the city to try to go take that next step forward with development of these parking lots.
And that's a very good point. And you can see how recently these plans were adopted. So this was just within the last couple of years.
Can anyone not see that with those lights on? Just, it's really important to see people who are actually making the presentation, I think, as it is to see the slides.
Sure.
Thank you, Ruth.
And this is the planning area designated by council, bound by Ashley, Liberty, Division, and William. And you can see the parking sites that are outlined here. So 4 of these sites have an opportunity for redevelopment, and then the 4th and William structure really has an opportunity to be retrofitted. And as we set out on this project, we created some goals for ourselves. The first is strategies for transforming parking lots into uses that can better serve our community. And the second is to improve the development process and to provide some clear expectations for both the developer and the community, really providing some trust that these are our goals as we move forward. And as we've moved through this process, we've realized that there are 3 elements that are pretty critical for creating a successful project. That is community feedback. So we need to know what our community is comfortable with. The second being project viability. Can a developer make the project happen? If not, we're not going to see it come to fruition. And then the third piece being public benefit and public cost. So you want an overall public benefit to the community. And what we're looking for here is the area right in the middle, where all 3 of these things come together. And that's been a theme throughout our process, is that we're looking for the area of agreement and alignment. And that's when we know we have a successful project. And to help us find this area of alignment, we've done a lot of outreach with our community, and that's documented on your screen. So early on in the process, we distributed a SurveyMonkey questionnaire and got about 2,000 responses. We've also held over 20 stakeholder meetings and had over 200 people participating in those events. So we've really been able to touch a lot of people through this process. And there's more to come. So now that we have these draft recommendations, we'll be taking them out later this month to test them again with the community.
And I think it's also important to point out here that we started out with this SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which was really kind of rudimentary, just to get us started. So we weren't sending this out as a referendum. How many votes do you get for this? How many votes do you get for that? This allowed us to get started and then go to directed, targeted groups and talk to people about more of the details of what they wanted to see.
And to further help us find this area of overlap, we've pulled in not only community feedback, but also feedback from a land use economist to help us understand the market and what's possible in the downtown and on these sites. And as you can see, community feedback confirms alignment with the plans that we discussed earlier. So density belongs in the core, and what people really want to see is a vibrant and active sidewalk experience. And the market study confirmed that we put our dollars where our mouth is. So we do spend money on those things that create that active sidewalk experience. You can see we're well above the national average in dining and entertainment. Retail, we tend to focus on small scale and independent stores. And in terms of lodging, our hotel occupancy is the highest it's been in the past 25 years, and it's the highest in the Midwest. And what we learned from our land use economist is that if we want to continue to support those kinds of uses and if we want to grow them, we need people. And office uses and residential uses provide the space to bring more people downtown. So they're really the drivers for all of those uses. And you can see that there's strong demand for both new office space and new residential space. The office figure up there is an addition to what's already been constructed, and it's a focus on large floor plate, so that's about 15,000 square feet or above. You can think about it in terms of a Barracuda or a Google. Currently, we'd have a really hard time accommodating another large office firm in our downtown because it's so limited.
Such as Barracuda.
Yes. And the housing, again, that's in addition to what's under construction currently, so just a really high demand in our downtown. And the community was very supportive of these uses. And then below that, you'll see some additional elements that aren't necessarily market-driven, but were raised by our community as being important. So we saw high alignment that context and quality design is really important to our community on these sites. Also, the inclusion of a cultural amenity in this planning area. And there was also agreement that urban open space and plazas are important to this part of downtown, and that it's important to have something included on the library lot. Where there is still not agreement on this element is what that looks like, and if there are additional needs beyond that. So you'll see in our recommendations how we're trying to deal with that. Okay, so now moving to the draft recommendations. This is how we're going to walk you through it, taking a look at what exists, recommendations for the public realm, and then recommendations for what occurs on the site. And then we'll try to move really quickly to the site level specifics. So we start out broad and then we'll move on to the sites. Just a reminder that these are the sites that we're talking about. And you can see William is the primary corridor that we're looking at. And this first set of elements really focuses on the existing assets in this area. So we have Main Street, like Transit Center, the library, and Liberty Street. Those things work well, and they're anchors that we need to support and try to create synergies with as these sites are developed. So looking at the old Y lot as an example, this first recommendation, again, focuses on those synergies. And we don't just want to create connections to adjacent sites, but also to the sidewalks, because we really want this area to transform into something that's more pedestrian friendly and interesting. As we move on to streetscape and transportation, our leadership committee was really focused on the need to improve William Street and to make it feel more pedestrian friendly and interesting than it does today. And the DDA, at least at the partnerships level, has expressed interest in possibly investing in this corridor as well. So we moved to streetscape improvements for William Street and pulling in the non-motorized plans and things like bike lanes. And then also recognizing that the developer will need to make investments in the adjacent streets, so we'll need to provide them with clear standards. And then lastly, just emphasizing the strength of the Blake Transit Center and this part of downtown as a transportation hub. And as we met with our community members, parking kept coming up. There was a concern that we might see a parking crunch as these sites are developed. And we know that there is capacity in the new Library Lane structure and in the 4th and William structure. But what we want to do is ask the DDA to create a plan for accommodating parking as these sites are developed. And then also to begin thinking about future opportunities for public parking. And because of the location of the Ashley and Williams site, that one's called out as a possible site to include public parking as part of the private development. And if parking is provided on site, here we are providing clear guidelines to the developer about what it needs to look like. So we don't want to see surface parking or anything that disrupts what an individual experiences as they walk down the sidewalk. So here we're saying it needs to be wrapped or concealed, and that image is an example of Zaragon West, where they have parking that's on the 2nd floor, I believe, and you can't tell that it's there. Okay, so as we move on to density and massing, these are pretty straightforward. So each site must include a building, must meet zoning standards. All of these sites are within D1 zoning, so they can be anywhere from 2 stories to 180 feet. And you can see from the legend here that we are pushing the density and the height closer to 5th Ave. And closer to Main Street, it's a little bit more mid-rise. And lastly, these sites need to follow design guidelines that encourage a sense of scale from the street. So we heard about this from Ray, the architectural detail that can be included to help create a sense of scale from the street. So you're seeing those examples there. And also just trying to strengthen the design guidelines by pulling them into this document. Okay, so as we move on to land use, you'll notice that our recommendations keep going back to that overarching theme of creating a vibrant downtown. So here we're saying should include a mix of uses. We want activity in these buildings throughout the day. So you could see from the legend that we're pushing the office focus towards the core of downtown, because of course most office workers don't mind being next to a transit station and other things, and saying that if residential does occur, it may be more likely towards the west side neighborhoods. And also pretty critical, must include an active ground floor use. So we want interesting things for people to look at as they walk by these buildings, and we also want people moving in and out of them, keeping the sidewalks busy. And then 5.3 just says it needs to adhere to premium guidelines if constructed over a certain density. So the sites closer to 5th Avenue would need to include some combination of LEED, residential, affordable housing, or plaza space. So now we're going to move on and take a look at some uses that aren't necessarily market driven, but that were called out as important to our community. So up until now, everything is within zoning and within market recommendations. These aren't necessarily within market recommendations, but they still provide other benefits to the community. And the first is affordable housing. There wasn't clear alignment from our community that affordable housing should be prioritized on these 4 sites in particular, but it was pretty clear that it's still an important community value. So we're encouraging a couple of things here. The first being encouraging City Council to dedicate a percentage of land sale for each site into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And the other elements that we're encouraging is for the developer to explore the premium options that are available. So they can build a little bit higher if they include affordable housing. And if they choose to do so, they should approach the DDA to see what kind of grant opportunities are available. As I said earlier, there was pretty strong agreement that a cultural use would be beneficial to this part of downtown. So we're encouraging it on 2 of the sites where it seemed there would be the most synergy with adjacent uses, such as the library or Main Street. And then the last piece here is open space. So you can see from this diagram that we have some existing public park space in Liberty Plaza. And then you can also see those arrows are pointing to some nearby public park space in the Diag and Hanover Square. And then what the other elements that we know is that there are planned park space on the west side as part of the Greenway. And we also know that there will need to be some kind of plaza space at the Library Lane site. And I just want to clarify that park space is distinct from open space because it is publicly owned. Most of these sites are city-owned. And open space doesn't necessarily have to be city-owned. So those are the things we know. What we don't know is if there are additional needs beyond that and how we connect what exists. So our recommendations begin by saying there needs to be an analysis of these needs. What do we do with the space we have currently? How do we prioritize them? And how do we connect them?
And just a piece on the distinction between potential urban open space and the public park is not only ownership but forever maintenance dollars. So in a public-private partnership where it's actually physically owned by a private entity, they would also have the responsibility of the long-term or forever maintenance of that space.
And that's a very good point, and it's a perfect segue into the site development. So if any of these sites in their development include open space, what we're saying is that it should be privately developed, owned, maintained, and programmed, but publicly accessible. So we're getting a public benefit without having the public cost. And we're also saying that it should occur in coordination with the building development. So you need synergy between what happens in the building and what happens outside of it, much like the success at Sculpture Plaza. Those 2 things work very well together. And then also we want a lot of transparency, windows and doors on that plaza space. And a great example of private open space in our downtown is right adjacent to the Carytown shops. And then this is just taking us back to architecture and the fact that what we heard from the community is the need for quality architecture and a higher standard on these sites. And our recommendations really focus on the design review board and how they work with the developer. So currently, the design review board provides feedback to the developer as individuals, and then the developer can choose to respond or not respond. And what we're saying here is that the design review board should respond as a single body so that the developer has a very clear idea of expectations, and that we're asking the developer to meet at least twice with the design review board and to be able to show responsiveness to their recommendations. Okay, so we're almost done with the overarching recommendations. And this section really helps us to think about how the uses inside the building begin to blend with those improvements on the street. So what we are saying in terms of street edge is that on every publicly accessible street, sidewalk, and plaza space, we want to see windows and doors. And we're encouraging them to take a look at the design guidelines that speak to this. And lastly, moving on to sustainability, another priority for our community, and just encouraging the developers to take a look at the development premiums available and also emphasizing some key approaches that are called out in the design guidelines. And this is just a very draft graphic from our consultants at JJR, but it helps you to think about how all of these recommendations look in the real world and how they really come together to blend in with the urban fabric. So you can imagine if these windows are lining William Street and we have bike lanes, you can really begin to see how active this corridor could be. Okay, so let's try to quickly move through the site level recommendations. Again, these are in addition to the overarching, so only when it's more specific are we noting something here. And we're going to begin with the sites closer to Fifth Avenue, and those are in an area that zoning and the design guidelines refer to as Midtown. And really, as all of you know, there's not a lot happening in this part of downtown. A lot of it is parking lots and sidewalks that aren't terribly interesting. So what this says is establish an identity for Midtown and focus on high density development. And we're going to begin with the 5th and William lot, which is currently, under current recommendations, the priority lot to go to sale. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One being its proximity to campus. We know that there's high demand in the campus area currently. We also know that the uses that we're recommending for this site are pretty market driven, so it's likely to be successful. And lastly, we've heard from some council members that they would like this to be the priority site for sale. So you can see here, we're really just adding more clarity to the earlier recommendations. And under parking, encouraging them to explore that below-grade connection to the Library Lane parking structure if they choose to do so. And again, this one's around 700%. It's perfect size to focus on large floor plate office in the core of our downtown, so we're encouraging them to do that. Under premiums, it's likely they'll blend in some residential uses, and we'd like them to explore evening uses as well. And we've kept this one pretty market-driven, really for number 4. We want to maximize the city's investment in this site so we can also maximize the dollars going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then the architectural recommendations are just speaking to high quality and that intent for Midtown. So we'll move on to the Library Lane and Fifth Avenue structure or site. And what we've learned from our land use economist is that if we begin to pair sites, so if we were to pair the old Y lot and the Library Lane site, it puts the city in a better position to leverage public amenities. So if you go back to those non-market driven uses that we talked about earlier, pairing the sites allows the city to be in a better position to ask for those kinds of uses, and it also puts the developer in a better position to respond.
So reiterate those benefits briefly.
So we talked about affordable housing, open space, and cultural uses. So if you were to split the sites up, then each site on their own needs to be financially viable. Okay, so this again just takes you back to the overarching recommendations. Density around 700%. Again, large floor plate office. This is very similar in size to the Y site. We're saying here must have a plaza or open space on site. We're just not quite sure what that looks like yet. And then again, that focus on high quality and design guidelines. And the 4th and William parking structure is a little bit different than the rest because of course it's not as flexible in what can happen here. So what the recommendations say is facade improvements are necessary. We should explore building out and activating that ground floor with some retail uses or office space and continue to accommodate alternative modes of transportation. So now we'll move on to the sites adjacent to Main Street. And the intent for this is really to maintain Main Street as this regional entertainment focus. So that's just reiterating that overarching intent. And this one, the density is a little bit lower, around 400%. And we're really not being very specific about the uses that occur here. Other than an active ground floor use, we're leaving it open to the market. And as we move on to the Ashley and William lot, again, this reiterates a lot of those overarching. Similar to the Main and William site, 400% FAR. And this one is a little bit different in the ground floor use. We're not saying that immediately it needs to include a ground floor use, but that it should be constructed to accommodate one. So if the market's not there at first, we feel that that's okay for this street. And this was another site that was called out as a possible cultural venue location. And then you can see the parking opportunity symbol that's noted there. So as we think about next steps for this project, as I said earlier, we now need to take these draft recommendations back out to the public, and currently we're scheduling meetings between December 12th and 20th. And we'll bring back refined recommendations to you folks on January 2nd, and we plan to present to City Council on January 14th.
And that's a work session. The 14th is a council work session.
And in terms of your responsibilities, there are quite a few as the leadership committee wraps up their work on this project. So you will need to approve a document that has recommendations in it, and it'll need to become a DDA document, not just a leadership committee document. And then send it on to Planning Commission and City Council. And once approved, you'll also need to think about making Connecting William Street development ready, and the Partnerships Committee has already been talking about many of these things. And within the resolution, there are a lot of steps to take as we now begin implementation. So this walks you through that, from hiring a real estate consultant to creating a decision-making tool all the way through to getting an agreement on the site. And I just want to give you a sense of what that decision tool looks like, and this will be another thing that the Partnerships Committee will have to tackle. I pulled some goals that were listed under Madison, Wisconsin's Capital Gateway Project. These are the goals they include in their RFP. So they lay those out for the developer very clearly. And typically you would have your goals, and you can begin thinking about how our recommendations could easily translate to these. And then you weight them according to priority, and that way the reviewer has a sense of those priorities, of the goals, and there's a pretty clear way to then rank the different proposals. So that's it. I'll turn it over to Sandy and Joan and step aside in case you need me for questions.
Bravo.
So if you two would like to call on our fellow DDA board members for their comments.
Yeah, if anybody
Let's start.
wants us to go back to some other slides or anything, feel free. Keith?
Question about there are a couple of spots where the cultural element was called out, and in one of them there was already the 700% FAR but on the William Street, or right, at this end, there was the 400 FAR. Is that something where that would be something that could be taken into account as, like, if you provide these amenities, there might be more flexibility?
It's
for the
D1, it's zone D1, so certainly that would be.
They have that option anyway. This
Right.
is just our kind of
But
recommending according to
But in terms of the
the-
recommendations, would that be something? I mean, we talk about cultural amenities being something that's going to make it less, it's less market driven. And I'm just wondering if this is a way that you're able to sort of help make it market driven.
Well, I think it also helps with the public benefit and public cost part of that. So a cultural component to it is probably not going to be a moneymaker for the developer.
Right.
So they will need to have some other capture, and perhaps that is an increased FAR.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Question on that. All these are in the D1 zoning, correct?
That's correct.
And they all conform to the that zoning, so that all these would be by right projects
Within zoning.
within the zoning. Either the 400% or the 700% with premiums.
With the premiums, correct.
Yeah, we're not recommending any changes to zoning. It's all whatever is there, that's our template.
And again, we're building on past plans, so we're not recreating or redefining anything, but we're taking the work all the way back to the residential task force up through the A2D2, and then just maybe sharpening the focus a little bit on it. So yes, D1 is all appropriate.
I'm a veteran of all those projects, and I'm glad to see that they're being used.
Roger served on the A2D2 committee for us.
For several years.
Yes.
So,
Other comments, Bob?
in terms of the housing, you talk a lot about residential, and I assume, is that all market-driven?
Not all of it. So what we have clarified in the plan is that we are encouraging the developer to look at 1 and 2 bedroom units to help diversify the new units in the downtown. So we're not necessarily gearing it towards student housing, which is a lot of what we've seen lately, but it's still supportable, more closer to workforce housing.
And some of the other housing might be supported by the proceeds of the sale of property. Is that part of the strategy?
The housing on site?
No, the housing trust fund, in terms of the proceeds of the sale of the property.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the Y lot, that's already been voted on, hasn't it, Mayor? About the proceeds of the Y lot going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
And that's one reason why I think you'll see it, and that recommendation is to maximize the return on that investment for that one in particular, because that at least has been designated for that purpose. So the more that we can support a high sale price on that, the more goes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
There's been a tremendous amount of work put into this in this last 9 months by a lot of people, and so I want to thank our staff, Amber in particular, our consultants, JGR, and Todd Poole, one use economist, and the leadership committee, who I think has done a really good job of trying to kind of weigh all the different factors involved in all of this. There's a lot to it, a lot of moving parts, looking at 5 different sites, et cetera, et cetera. And the focus all along has been what can create transformative change. That's kind of been our sort of mantra from the beginning. And what can really cut across a lot of boundaries and a lot of lines to benefit the community. So the other entity to thank is the community themselves who weighed in, those 2,000 folks in the survey. And so as a result, there are 2 particular things that I'm concerned about and want to talk about. The first is the issue of the park on the top of the parking structure. I appreciate folks coming out and talking about it, because I think it is important, because I think one thing that the leadership committee felt strongly about was that, as Amber indicated, there are a bunch of empty parking lots down in that part of town, right in the core of downtown. We don't have a very good central piece of town. We're disconnected between State and Main Street and so forth, and Liberty and William. And so I think there's been a feeling from the beginning that, in particular, the Y lot and the top of the parking structure are maybe the 2 key sites for attention first to help create a magnet, a focus for downtown that could then lead to other changes. The park issue is a challenging one, because in a lot of ways it's really appealing. And it's appealing to me too, and so a lot of discussion was had about it. And I think the overall feeling was, as I would characterize it, that the notion of trying to activate that part of town, have more people, more stuff, more people in the streets, more businesses, more activities, was a key issue. And there was not a level of confidence that a park in an urban setting, in a city our size, and considering the other park amenities there are around, and some having challenges and others being viable, that this was necessarily the right place for a park. Now, having said that, obviously the perspective from the DDA's point of view has been a structure was built to be able to support a large building on top of it. That was sort of the concept from the beginning, while including a plaza that could be for certain types of purposes. At this point, when this moves on, it's city council can obviously, weigh in and make their decision. So just to try to address that part of it is, it just between. It wasn't just economics, it's also sort of the philosophy approach. And I think there is an argument to be made on both sides about it and potentially more information gathered. I don't know that our group is the best one for gathering that. So that's sort of my take on the park. The other second issue that I want to bring up is that up until this time, one of the things that had been recommended for the Y lot and the top of the parking structure lot, in addition to office, was consideration of a hotel, which has now been pulled out, as best I can tell. And from my perspective, that's a mistake. Personally, I'm just one person, but I feel that, particularly on the Y lot, a hotel could be a transformative game changer for downtown. I think that a hotel meets a lot of the things that were the goals of the project. It creates an anchor in that part of town that would make a ground level restaurant and or hotel supported retail a magnet to help draw more businesses onto William, which I think an office is challenged to do in that location. I think William Street is a great location to connect up straight up William Street to the university. I think the university would welcome a hotel. I think the data seems to indicate that there's the demand for it. So I know it's not a popular perspective, but I feel it's important that it be considered and talked about some more. To my knowledge, it hasn't come back to the leadership committee, the issue of dropping it. So those are sort of my take on sort of what I feel are two of the important elements as we move forward.
John, can I address the second one? We have one slide that has a bullet item of the lodging.
That was right at the very beginning.
And perhaps what you may be recommending is that we bring that emphasis up a little bit more, that it's kind of buried in there, and that it would be a stronger presentation if we elaborated a little bit more about the data that we've seen.
Yes, and keeping in mind the big picture, as I see it, the whole purpose of this is to create a tool for the community, for city council, for developers it's a vehicle that there's been a lot of discussion around. Ann Arbor being Ann Arbor, there are a lot of dissenting points of view about everything. So this is really an attempt to try to, as best we can, sift through all of this. And I just want to really emphasize that was the purpose, but it was really trying to balance community interests, economic interests, and market interests. And you can see part of what was part of this was lodging came up as a pretty important part.
I'd just like to add to that. I saw the Convention and Visitors Bureau report about hotel occupancy. It is the highest in our 25-year history. Of all the Midwest, it's like almost 70%, and that includes Chicago. So we are way ahead in Washtenaw County. And I think there is a demand there, and I think it's something that can be looked at. Lodging, I think, should stay in there, so I agree with you.
Part of the reason I look at it as being transformative in a lot of ways. I look at it as being a great opportunity for folks who are visitors to the university to be drawn downtown. I see it as a great opportunity for jobs that cut across a lot of economic stratas. I see it as a place where, if there's a classic sort of hotel restaurant, there's usually performance as part of it. It kind of creates a cultural amenity. It creates that sort of a hub in that part of town that I think would be very, very powerful. We've got the transit right next to it, which is perfect for visitors. They walk straight into the station. We've got a great public library right across the street as a resource. We just have so many really attractive, strong elements, and I think it's an opportunity. Based on the information we have to date. Now, obviously, I'm open to be,
Another point to that is too, the air ride is right there.
Right.
Which is being very heavily used.
Right, it's delivered right from the airport.
Now, needless to say, there'd be more work and analysis needed and blah, 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 but conceptually, at least for this level of looking at a study.
I'd like to echo actually both of John's points. I mean, just to mention about the library lot, I mean, I park there, I walk by there every day, and I mean, just like you said, I mean, it is appealing to have that idea, to have something there. I guess it's just the ongoing discussion of what it is that's actually going to bring something there. But to echo the second point, I mean, to add on to the idea of a hotel there's parking right there. I mean, and that's not, and for the issues that we had in the past about that structure not necessarily always being full, that is something that could address it with a hotel. If there was something that was worked out with the hotel where there was a number of passes to allow parking for the hotel, so that would keep the hotel from being higher up. It would keep it from those issues. Again, I mean, just the big point about visitors coming downtown. I mean, to have parents that, let's say, want to come and visit their kids to go to University of Michigan, they don't necessarily want to be on Southview. I mean, they want to go there and, visit family and whatnot, but at the same time, Main Street is where they would, I would suppose, want to hang out more. So, I mean, I echo both of your points, and I agree with you, and I hope that's something that we can change.
Any more comments?
All right, well, we'll have time if people want to kind of think about all of these things some more. As Sandy said, we'll have our partnership meeting and then our next board meeting as well. So there's always a little extra time to work on it.
Do you want to talk about your next partnership meeting, when it is?
Yep, Wednesday, December 12th, 9 a.m.
Hey, anything more from partnerships?
I think that we are taking on some of the things from the retreat, so I think that will also be part of our discussion.
The Don Farm grant request.
Oh, the Don Farm grant will be on the agenda. Okay. Good, thank you. The next is the Operations Committee. We'll start with Roger Hewitt.
At our meeting last week, we received from our auditors a draft of the annual audit. We have not received the final edition of that, but in the words of the auditor, it was a completely clean audit. There were absolutely no recommendations of either numerical changes or operational changes. So essentially on the audit, there's absolutely nothing to report. Our financial statements are indeed accurate. The auditor has confirmed that they are indeed accurate. There was one line in the audit where we wanted some clarification of exactly what it was for. This was grants. That also included our debt service in that. So the final audit will have that line clarified so it's clear exactly what that is. But other than that, and that was the auditor's report, was a little unclear. There is absolutely nothing to report from the audit that is not already reflected in our financial statements. On to the annual parking report. Go to it's page 11. This is although it's a lot of numbers, I'll try and do a little brief summary. This is essentially a profit and loss statement on each of our parking facilities. Total revenues, total expenses, revenues per space and expenses per space and profits per space. I think people immediately will jump to the second to the bottom line and look at whether a particular structure made money or not. The key to that line is a couple lines of 3 lines above that, the bond payments. There are 4 structures that we still are making bond payments on as of this audit, which was the end of June. 2 of those are the original bonds to build them, the 4th Street structure and the 4th and Washington structure. So those structures are not profitable in and of themselves because they are paying off the bonds, the original bonds. The Fourth and William and the Maynard structure also have bonds on them from major repair work and expansion done on them. However, they are still profitable even though they are making a debt service payment on them. Of course, the overall idea is not whether one individual structure is profitable or not profitable, but how the entire system works together. And if you can see on the very right, our net annual income after all our expenses is nearly $800 per space in the system, with our anticipated net revenue being about $5.6 million in this year. These are not the final audited figures, but we believe they're very, very close to what the actual figures are.
And this is after the payment to the city?
Yes, the payment to the city is under operating expenses. The second line, it includes the payment to the city. It also includes rent we pay on several parking lots that we are privately owned that we operate and pay rent to the owners of. I should also mention that the First and Washington lot has a very low net in it because that was closed for the construction of the new Village Green project during this last year. And the Fingerly lot we turned back to the owners, I believe, in November, so a year ago. So that also is a fairly small number. They're pretty insignificant as far as the overall picture goes, but certain special circumstances on those two.
So on the city payments, is that prorated over each
Yes.
structure?
Yes, essentially. The city payment is 17% of gross revenue, so that figure would be 17% of the gross revenue of each facility, plus with the facilities that are rented from private owners would be added on top of that. I believe that the payment just to the city is, of its 17% was right around $3 million in this last fiscal year, which I think was about $300,000 more than was budgeted in revenue. So our revenues are up, and they continue to be up, as we'll get to in the next page. Questions?
Questions for Roger? Moving right along.
Next is on the following page, our monthly parking report. Again, revenues again show a very strong increase, 15.5%. The number of hourly patrons is up slightly. Deviations are listed on the right of basically lots or structures that we have closed, or in the case of Library Lane opened. We point out that the Library Lane structure, if I'm getting the correct one here, had about $78,000 in revenue in October, which is we consider pretty good for a new structure. We are going to look at the statistics that we, both the data that we get and the data we bring to the board, as we're trying to evaluate the dynamics of adding the new structure and just the increased demand in downtown. We've requested Republic Parking to provide us with some more detailed statistics, particularly of hourly users and how they affect the system, and we will probably be modifying this report a little bit to try and get a little better picture of particularly what's going on with hourly users in the system. So I'm glad to answer questions on...
Questions on...
I do have a little additional parking information, which, just depending on your viewpoint, is either good or bad. We had a rather... last Friday night was Midnight Madness. And we had a rather unique occurrence that's only happened once before and never at night. We maxed out the system on Friday night. At some point during Friday night, every single parking space and every single structure and surface lot was filled. That's nearly 5,600 spaces. That happened on the Friday of Art Fair, But it wasn't even quite this many because there was a level of the new library lane structure that wasn't open at that point. But including the library lane structure, every single one was filled. Maynard and the 4th and Washington structure, during the course of the day, they had the equivalent of filling up and emptying 4 times. And
Those are filled with cars, right? Not people standing there.
no, this is vehicles. It's pretty exciting. If we had not had the library lane structure, our parking operators say we would have had to shut down the system, stop taking people for about 2 hours at the beginning of the evening. That we were that much demand. We had about almost 1,500 more cars go in between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. than we did last year on the same Midnight Madness. So, for us who like to see a lot of parking usage, this is pretty exciting.
Well, you know, it's even more important than the parking usage, it's the people usage, just people downtown. You know, it's what we.
There were lots of people downtown Friday night. For those of us who were down there.
That's why we need William Street too now. You know, first we added Washington Street.
I certainly saw the increase in my numbers at the restaurant. It was an impressive night. There was a lot of activity. I want to particularly thank Art Lowe and Republic Parking and his staff for figuring out how to squeeze that many cars into the system in that short period of time. It's not just a real simple thing to do. You know, keeping cars where when a structure fills up, getting them directed to places that are open, getting people in and out as quickly as possible. It was quite an accomplishment. It's something that has never happened at night, ever. And really only once in the daytime. So that's my parking report.
I'd just like to add to that briefly. I was speaking with Maura Thompson, who's the executive director of Main Street, and she said business was booming. They were not just here walking around, they were buying. So this is good news for our community. All right, next we have John Moat and Transportation.
A couple of things. Are we still calling it the bike cage? Did we come up with a better term?
The bike house? It was the bike house.
The bike house.
Just read what it says on the sheet of paper.
Yes. Well, at our last operations meeting, we took a look at some drawings prepared by Dan Mooney, a fellow who worked with Carl Lukenbach. And so he's come up with some good sketches, some preliminary pricing, and we're going to work towards launching that in March. I don't know if there are any sort of new details. I don't think there's. We gave you the overview last time of how many spaces and all the rest of it, so I think you got a pretty good idea. So I think we're on track for that. The second thing is the bike share program. It's run into a speed bump because of the change in the way the state provides dollars to that type of project for capital costs versus operating costs. So as a result, you know, the CEC is looking to increase their asks of folks, and there's actually a meeting tomorrow where we'll hear more about where things are with it. And my perspective at this point is to, as much as possible, put it on the university. You know, that they're really the ones spearheading it, putting most of the money into it, and it gets a little complicated in that a lot of these bike share programs all over the world, as they ramp up, they become a source for advertising, and that's a lot of what pays for the ongoing operations cost. But the university is in an unusual situation because of their, you know, how they feel about advertising associated with a university amenity. So that's something that Steve Dolan, who's working hard on this, and Steve Dolan from the university, and I think that's going to put into perspective, because I think from our perspective is that it's one thing, the original capital costs that we know we'd be into and what we'd be willing to put in to some degree, but then what's to me of even greater concern is ongoing operations costs. So, you know, we're going to monitor and sort of see what evolves here, and we'll report back.
Thank you, John. John, do you have any?
I do not.
Okay, we'll move on then to other DDA business, the DDA board and committee meeting calendar, which was sent out to you, and I believe Sandy Smith has some suggested amendments to that.
I do. I would like to propose that the DDA monthly board meeting of August 7th is removed from the calendar, and I would like to propose that the DDA partnership committee meeting of August 14th is also removed from the calendar. And I will let ops weigh in on their August meeting.
Okay, then there's another question at the beginning, January 2nd. Do we need to move this because it comes right after the holiday?
I would move that to the 9th, given the fact that January has 5 Wednesdays. I don't see any problem in doing that. And also note that if you're going to do it on the date, you're talking about staff being in here in the holiday week, putting packets together, things like that. So I don't see what it would damage, given that there's those 5. It means you won't have a crunch in getting ready for the February meeting either. You'll have the normal 4 weeks.
Did you want to move partnerships?
Everyone agreeable?
We'll work through August in the operation.
Oh, the ops committee stays.
Yeah, we'll have the partnership.
We never rest. Roger, speak for yourself.
They'll give us another meeting for the 14th.
Okay, are there any other suggestions?
I'm just wondering about this conversation about partnerships. Is that going to be put off, or does that impact the,
I would
working
rather,
session?
it would impact the working session, so I'd rather leave it on the 9th, even if we do it in the morning and then
have the
have it following.
Okay.
I would like to have as much time for input and modifications, tweaking, whatever.
So partnerships in January will be on January 9th.
So that'll be followed by the board meeting at noon.
Right.
So for
Amber, does that
calendar-
work for you?
If there are a lot of revisions, it'd be pretty quick turnaround in terms of graphics and things. But I think we can work within partnerships to vet it pretty well beforehand and that can work.
Okay. That completes our business. Is there anyone from the audience who wishes to speak at this time? You have 4 minutes.
I have a little piece of DDA business.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Just mostly an update. There was some coverage recently in the press of the task force that is working on North Main, which Sandy's part of, and council made some special provisions so that we could keep Sandy on there. And Councilmember Briere is representing the city council on that. But I think they're making very good progress, and it's something that we could get a report from our Sandy at some point. But I also wanted to talk briefly about what that means for the Greenway, which has been something that's been a city and goal for a very long time. A group that I've been working with for a few years has been meeting to talk about 415 West Washington, and we came to a conclusion quite a while ago that the first Greenway Park would be easier to do the first one on North Main. So that conversation is progressing, and in the meantime, we're doing a study of the building. The city is contracted for that. At 415 West Washington, as you may recall, the desire was for a community art center there and a Greenway Art Park. And that would become, so all we've done really is change the idea that now the first Greenway Park would be on North Main. And the reason, one of the main reasons for that is it will, if things get worked out with the task force, have a connection to the border-to-border trail, getting across Main somehow into the railroad tracks. That will mean that we have a much better case to present to the state for a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. County Parks has indicated that they're interested in that. And then once, if we can get that one Greenway Park in place, then it becomes much easier to do 415 because now you can provide some sort of linkage. You may have to cross some streets and whatnot over to the North Main. But I just wanted to keep that strategy out there a little bit in front of us. The Greenway is alive and well, given the fact that it hasn't moved as quickly as we may have hoped, but we are just coming out of the worst recession since the 1930s. So that possibility is out there. I think that we have an opportunity in the next few years to make it a reality. But that work continues. Obviously, we're going to have to work with the Parks Advisory Commission. If you notice that the city's it passed wonderfully, but the millage renewal for parks passed. but that covers maintenance of the parks that we have now. It doesn't really go into how new parks that are consistently maintained. So a lot of things to be worked through, but I think very good progress being made. And your report is due.
For just the 721 North Main
And
site is due in December. So no.
So good progress made,
Yep.
and it really, I think that group is working very well
In
together.
fact, we'll vote on that. I think it's tonight.
So, great, and we could get a report on that at our next meeting.
Absolutely. And if I may just follow up, 2 of those greenway sites are within the DDA. So the 415 site and the first in William is, of course, designated to be part of the greenway, and that's within the DDA.
Yeah, speaking as someone who was on the Greenway Task Force.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. All right, now we have audience participation. We have, each of you has 4 minutes. Mr. Partridge.
I am Thomas Partridge, resident of Ann Arbor and of Washtenaw County, recent candidate for seats in both the Michigan Senate and House of Representatives, and a Democratic Party leader. I am here to propose to this body that you adopt a theme. It appears that this body, since its inception, has been a body using public and private funds, but has been going in circles without a theme, just as the Ann Arbor City Council under Mayor Heathkey's administration has also been going in circles without a theme. I'm proposing a theme, since this very building site and the seats that we sit in today are probably on land that at one time was owned and lived in by American Indians, and also was probably land connected in some way with the Underground Railroad in the pre-Civil War era as well as the Civil War era up to today, and we are the inheritors of that conflict even today, of a place that is crucial to the civil rights of everyone. Black Americans, Indian Americans, people of all colored races, as well as Caucasians and Hispanic people. And here at this very board meeting, as well as at most Ann Arbor City Council meetings, most Washtenaw County Commission meetings, which meets beginning at 6:30 tonight in the Commission chambers, the elected officials, the appointed officials to this board, the audience participants are all Caucasian, despite the fact that demographics have pointed out we have a changing America. I'm proposing that this body, as well as the Ann Arbor City Council, the Washtenaw County Commission, the Michigan Legislature, adopt the freedom theme for the 21st century, that the AATA sponsors transportation under the title Freedom Rides and rather than Michigan Flyer, that this body works to build integrated downtown development authority area, integrated socially, economically, culturally, and incorporates a free access to free university, free accessible transportation, free accessible health care, free accessible cultural events under the umbrella of a Ann Arbor dedicated to freedom and equality. So that is my proposal. That should have been the title of these plans, Connecting William Street. We need to connect, all right. This body needs to connect to the society already inherent in the city of Ann Arbor, already inherent in the county and the state, which is a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic society, and it's not done, and it hasn't adopted a central theme. There is no excitement to the plans, no matter how many PowerPoint and glossy print productions are made by this body in planning for city plans. We need the excitement of a central theme. Other cities in competition with Ann Arbor in Detroit have scooped Ann Arbor and Detroit now for decades, including Atlanta, Georgia, including San Francisco, including Chicago, including New York City and Boston. They have themes, they've adopted themes, they've come up with exciting cultural, educational, and social themes that are lacking in this city, because this city, under white Caucasian dominance of appointed boards, of elected boards, continues to operate as though this were a 1950s society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the DDA board? Susan.
So I'm wearing my Citizen of Ann Arbor hat, and I just wanted to take the moment to thank Sandy Smith for her tenure as a city council member. I know you've stepped down. I just want to say thank you. And to Commissioner Ligon, who tonight is having her last session on the Washtenaw County Board. We, the citizens, have been the beneficiaries of your hard work, and I just wanted to not let that go by without thanking you both.
Thank you, Susan. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I know we adjourn.
We are adjourned.